Everybody see my screen?
Yes.
So just the, I think we have, do we have Jason on? Jason Cohen? We have Phil, you're on, right? Mark, you're on?
Yes.
Steve Scory, Craig Calabrese, and I didn't see if the fire chief, Mike Sullivan, but we have a quorum, so we'll get going. So the first agenda item was the approval of the January 21st, 2021 meeting minutes. I sent those out. Hope we've all got a chance to review those. So we need a motion.
I move to approve the January 21st meeting minutes.
Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can't hear you.
I'll second.
Okay, now I hear.
motion.
Okay. Let's do a roll call. So you made the motion. Was it Mark? You seconded?
Yes.
I'll second it.
So Steve, yeah,
I think Phil made the motion.
and Craig.
Yes.
Then the meeting minutes from the 2-3 meeting, February 3rd meeting. Get a motion for those.
Make a motion for approval of the February 3rd meeting minutes.
Second. Mark,
Second.
Steve. Craig.
That's for me.
Okay, so that's approved. Okay, thank you. So second thing on our agenda item today was the review of the MEP systems and the fire protection systems. So thank you, Janet and Amy and GGD. I understand you were in the building last week. You did a tour. So I'll hand it over to you guys. Do you want to share the screen, Chris or David or Janet?
It'll be one quick question. Does it make sense to do the civil site first? It might be a lot shorter, and they'll introduction to the utilities, and then when GGD talks, it might connect. Does that make it? Is that, or do you have to go in order?
No, we can skip. I think just one of the committee members has to propose we change the order.
Oh, okay.
So Phil, do you want to propose we do civil
Suppose
first?
we change the order to civil site first, MEP second.
Okay.
Second.
I second.
Okay, thank you.
I think it'll be much shorter, and you know, it will help the conversation. So,
Okay.
okay. Brandon Barry's here, Jim Jackson and Robert from PAR are all here. Brandon and Jim are civil and Robert is geotechnical. So we can ask anything we want about that along the way. So I thought I saw Robert in here, but so, okay, Brandon or Jim, whoever.
I'm getting a note that screen sharing is disabled. If I could get permission to share, I can share the site and utility plans.
So I just made you co-host, Brandon.
Thank you. And can everyone see my screen here?
Yep.
Yes. Yep.
I'm going to start with the site layout, which I think is the easier. It's a pretty simple site layout changes that we're making. So starting at the front along Union Street, there's a 3-story building addition being constructed on the northwest side here. It's going into an existing landscaped area and is within the site. It does not look like that this pushes any closer. The dash line that you see here is the setback line from Union Street. So this does not push any closer than the bump out on the building already. And then to the east of that is the vestibule addition that is shown here, just a 1-story vestibule addition with some access doors on either side, some modifications to the existing walkways. There's an existing entrance island at the front of the site here with some flagpoles and a couple perimeter lights that would be proposed to be relocated to be in line with the new vestibule area. We would move the accessible parking spaces out of that area, construct a new ramp for those. We assume any of the lights or flagpoles would be able to be reconstructed within this landscaped area here. It is notable the vestibule does appear to protrude closer to the Union Street setback or property line than the existing bump out does. We do want to look in a little bit closer at some of the setbacks because at some of the corners, the building has almost a zero lot line. And given that it has frontage on 4 streets, they could all be considered a front yard setback. So if we use that interpretation, we don't believe that we'd be encroaching any closer than this corner or this corner here, but it is something that would be open to interpretation. We'd want to look into. At the rear of the site, we're proposing an addition to the Sally Port. This will pump out into an existing pavement area. There's some bollards that would be reconstructed near the 2 entrances for it. But again, it's just constructing into pavement, so it won't have too much disturbance to the existing site access in that area. So I don't know if there's any questions on the site layout or any comments that anyone has or anything you'd like me to look at a little bit closer before I move on to the utilities.
So just Brandon, those setbacks, is that something we just run by the building inspector? He'll make the determination whether we need anything.
Yeah, typically we would. And again, like I said, it's a unique situation when we have frontage on 4 lots. So we could technically say we have 4 front yard setbacks and our existing front yard setback is 0 or 1 feet, and we are not encroaching closer than that. So I think it's just a quick question with the building inspector to see if he shares that interpretation. If he does, then we're good to go under any previous variance approvals that were provided for the site. If not, we may need a variant for the vestibule and the Sally Port additions, but that is something just to run by the building inspector to see if he agrees with that interpretation.
Okay. And just, I think where the 3-story addition is going, when we spoke about moving flagpoles and stuff, there is a memorial there.
Yep.
Which will have to be moved to. We'll have to find a location for that.
So the memorial will also be moved as well. We'll make sure that we review photos and account for that area. We have a pretty sizable landscaped area, so it could be moved here or put in the landscaping that will remain in front of that 3-story addition. Moving on to the utility plan, there are a number of utilities that are running within the area of the 3-story addition, the vestibule, and the Sally Port. So starting with the 3-story addition, here you can see it appears there's an existing 6-inch roof drain that connects into a manhole. It also appears to have an 18-inch pipe running through here that, while not 100% clear what it is, we believe picks up the roof leaders and connects it into the drainage system that then exits out to a manhole at the front of the site and then out into a manhole in what I believe is Center Street here. So the roof leaders on the existing building would need to be relocated to the front of that. A new header pipe would be connected through them to connect them into the drainage manhole. And then this 6-inch line, we'd have to coordinate with the structural team to make sure it works with their foundation design, but we assume the easiest would be to bring this through and out the proposed foundation wall. If there's not going to be exterior roof leaders and it's going to be an interior roof drain, that could be tied into that line, or we just bring that out there. So a little bit of rerouting of some of the drainage within the footprint of this addition. Additionally, the sanitary sewer for the building comes out in this area. Again, it looks like it comes out and ties into a manhole in Center Street here. We would hope that the elevations on this are pretty low. This line is about 13 feet below grade, so it looks like it's probably coming out just below the basement elevation in the building. Hopefully be able to maintain that condition, coordinate with the structural team to ensure that we can either penetrate through their foundation here or go underneath that as required. So it looks like while there are some utilities here, we have some good options to reroute them outside of the footprint of that building. Moving on to the vestibule, the drain line that we're looking at some minor modifications over here continues across the face of the building and will be within the footprint of the vestibule addition. So what we would propose is to grab that just on site here, reroute it around the vestibule building before tying back in to some of the other modifications that we're making. So maintain the existing drainage patterns that we're seeing. These likely are the outlet points for these roof leaders coming off the building. So we would retie those in and maintain the existing drainage flows and drainage point that we have. One thing that we'll need to look at, there is limited landscaped area on the site at the front and on the side here. The 3-story addition is going to be constructed within that landscaped area. So looking at areas that we could potentially mitigate any of the increase in stormwater flows based off of this increase in impervious area could be challenging, just given that the building is within about 10 feet of the property line. So we can't maintain the 10-foot setback you would usually see for a stormwater mitigation system. This project is a redevelopment, and under the stormwater handbook, redevelopments don't have to meet all the standards if there are extenuating site circumstances, which I think we can point to limited space on this site to do that. The alternative would be potentially looking to construct something within the right of way, but because that's not on our property, it's not abundantly clear whether that would be allowed. So there's some conversations with the engineering department in town and looking at how they would agree with our approach of treating this project as a redevelopment. The alternative is, while we have more pavement area in the rear of the site and more ability to construct a stormwater system, we could look to do something at the rear over by the Sallyport addition, but we wouldn't be mitigating where we're making the biggest increase. This is a building being constructed in pavement, so it doesn't really change the characteristics of the drainage here. So we're providing mitigation in an area that's not consistent with where we're making the impact. So there's some thinking and thought process that we'll need to review with the city or with the town as we progress our drainage design. Just given the changes at the front here. Looking at the Sallyport, there is a catch basin right along the edge of the building addition here. To move that out of the area of influence of the foundation, we would propose to push that catch basin about 5 to 6 feet further away. Again, the pavement would still drain in the same area that it is. We tie into the existing drain manhole that we're connecting to. So limited changes for drainage in this area, just giving a little bit of flexibility to construct this building and the associated foundations. And the one last item that we wanted to mention relative to utilities is there is an existing transformer here. Pushing the Sallyport out the way it's shown, this wall will encroach a little bit into the potential setbacks for this structure. Be something we'd want to take a look at, review National Grid's requirements, and it may just change the nature of construction of this wall to make sure that it complies with their, sometimes they'll have blast wall requirements or other types of construction they want to see when you are this close to a transformer. So this will just be something we'll need to coordinate with National Grid or Eversource, whoever the utility is that has jurisdiction over that, to make sure that they are in agreement with what we're proposing.
I think it's a town utility, right?
It's a municipal light plant.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'd have to work with them to see how they want to handle, potentially pushing this wall a little bit closer into the setback there. Those are the main utility impacts that we've seen as a result of this. I think while there are some that will need to be relocated, that it's not massive relocations, and most of them should be able to tie back in and maintain their outlet points to the extent practical. So that's what we had for the site and utility at this point. Obviously, from a grading perspective, we'll be tying back into existing grades to the extent possible. I think these are really the two items that we wanted to point out. So if there aren't any other site or utility questions, I can hand it back over to let the MEP team and fire protection team talk about what they've seen.
I got a drainage question real quick. Do you need to camera any of those roof drains to confirm their connections out front? Or are you just making assumptions based on this drawing?
We've looked, there's not, so we're looking based off this drawing. We've looked at some of the original construction documents that we're providing, and there aren't clear indications of where they're going. So the alternatives would be to camera them to determine where they ultimately drain to, or hand excavation to see what they're doing. So if we wanted to get surety on where they're going, a camera through the roof leaders and up from this manhole would probably be beneficial to give us a little bit more information on what we're looking to do.
Yeah, and then you had mentioned something about something up by the fire department vehicle entrance, but that's all uphill. I don't know, how could an infiltration system work? That was just a side comment, right? It's not.
It was just, we have
considered,
more room in this area. So potentially, we have a roof drain that's coming in here in this catch basin. These could potentially be tied into, an underground infiltration system here, just because we have a little bit more room to get it away from the building lines that we would need to. So it's just an area that we have it. I don't think it's a smaller area of the roof that we're doing, or we have to pick up some of the other roof drains that have a much larger area. It's just, this is the one area of the site that we actually have some real estate between the building and property lines to work with. But I think it has a number of challenges and a number of design obstacles that we'd have to, figure out, understand completely and find the best way around. So I don't think it's a exact viable option. It was just here's a potential solution and something we may need to show that we've chased down to say that we don't think there's a viable way to handle all the flow impacts that we're creating here.
Yeah, the vehicle weight traffic over it constantly, I think probably going to be that, and it being way uphill from most of the property. But I think the vehicle weight back and forth is going to prove to be difficult to
I
design
think
it.
there's, yeah, I
You're
think
designing
the-
a runway, you're basically designing it for a Boeing. So,
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's a challenge. Like you said, it's uphill, so we really can't capture a lot of the roof. So how effective that system would be, it's not, typically when you're providing mitigation, you want to be close to where you're making the impacts, and we wouldn't really be doing that as best we could. So I don't, it's just because I have pavement real estate here, but it's not the best pavement real estate I've ever had to work under.
thanks.
You're welcome.
Brandon, can I ask you a really quick question?
Of course.
So Joe Conway, I'm the Director of Public Works. On the Sallyport portion up top, what's the difference between the corner of the building and the curb there? The only reason why I ask is that's where the dumpsters are located now. I got to fit a trash truck basically into that section right there.
So just about 20 feet, or right here, just about 8 or 9. So we may need to look to peel that curb back and open it up. This trash may also want to get angled a little bit versus kind of the head in that they're doing.
I would say if you have the ability to probably cheat that vertical granite curb in, the radius too, and probably the walkway, but we're probably going to need a little bit more room there just to get the trash truck back there to empty that dumpster.
You could do that and even look to do like a mountable granite curb instead of a vertical, do like a sloped granite curb. So even if they have to, they have a little bit of play with the wheels, not slamming into a vertical granite curb. So I think that's definitely a viable comment.
Yeah, exactly. And then the only other question I have for you is probably not going to be a huge concern for me, but maybe somebody down the road is going to thank me that I asked you this. The sewer line going under the new part of the addition. Is there any way we can get a clean out somewhere before the sewer line exits the building, preferably before it takes a bend? So if you head to the right a little bit, where you show it coming out, I'm sure it's going to sweep probably like a 45 or something like that. If we could get access through a cap, so God forbid if we ever had to snake that or clean that, we're not, jacking through the floor and trying to do something like that. Hopefully we can get in, before it heads out of the building, do what we have to do and then get out.
Yeah, I think it's a great comment to have, like you said. So, whether it's maintaining this manhole somehow through the floor and providing access through it, or if it is just a clean out within the building, that's something that we can coordinate with Janet's team and the plumbing team on this as we're going. So you guys have some sort of access inside the building. And then obviously we wanted to keep this manhole outside the building, so you would have access coming in from this way. But I agree, having something in there would be beneficial for you guys as well.
Thank you.
Brandon, could you widen the curb cut up above where the dumpsters are?
Here?
Yes, or is it too close to the intersection?
We'd have to, we hadn't explored looking at it, so I don't know offhand what the separation is. We're about 41 feet. I would think looking at it and just what the existing site features are, we do have a street tree here that we'd want to look at. So we could potentially look to cut the curb back, a little bit this way to get a little bit of extra width. I'd want to check both, what the maximum curb width that's allowed is. Obviously, they have a wider cut for the fire station, but there's probably some leeway to allow for this access. So that could be a viable option there that we can chase down.
Brandon, could you, this is Janet, could you make another whole curb cut for just that and head it straight out onto the street? Not that that's a great idea, but so we go straight out on the Crescent.
I would think, I think the idea of expanding it, having 2 curb cuts, the second curb cut would have to be roughly in this area. It
Yeah,
looks like we
okay.
have a crosswalk, some accessible access, and this curb cut would definitely be much closer than just pushing this out, 5-10 feet close to that street tree there. Also, I think having that truck access being directly pulled in, here, if we can get some room, the truck should be able to get into the site and then back out versus kind of using the right of way for their operations. This looks like something that would be viewed more favorably.
Okay, great, thanks.
I
Right,
think you
can
have an
we
electric
flip it?
charger over there somewhere too for the parking attendant's car. I think that's over in that back corner. You could just move to rollaway dumpsters, Joe. Joe, you do the trash pickup or is it a contractor? Is it a hauler?
So that's JRM actually goes in there and hooks the can with the back of the refuse truck. So,
You
you're
could move
designing
to-
the fire side for those big, long, cumbersome trucks. There's the same. If it's kitty cornered like that, and we have the distance between the corner of the building and the curb, though, it shouldn't be an issue. It should be a straight shot, even with, potentially the parking attendant car in the corner there. They should still have enough room to get in and do what they're going to do.
I think angling that dumpster is the only option because there is the charging station. Plus there's an entrance exit door right here next
Yeah,
to
right there.
Sally Port. So you can't block that with the dumpster.
We'd look to keep it as close as we could. Obviously, rotating it, we'd match this pad size. But that'll be something that we'll explore for the first schematic design that we're putting out. This is exactly the type of feedback that we're looking for, and we'll get something that's on here and point out how we think everything works in this area, and that'll be circulated in our schematic plan.
Could you flip it to the other side of the Sally Port? In that area?
That's a parking space, but that's certainly something to think about. There are two
Yeah.
back-to-back parking spaces. I'm correct, Chief, right? That's parking.
That's correct. There are two back-to-back spaces right next to that transformer.
Mhm.
If
I
we
don't
went
know
with
what clearance you need around that transformer though, and if you'd
Yeah.
be looking to, if you'd need like a blast wall between the transformer and the dumpster enclosure, if you do
Yeah.
that.
No,
we'd look to do it.
the dumpster would just need to be, it's non-combustible, so just 5 feet away.
Could even look to do it on this side, and then the lost parking spaces here could get picked back up in the existing dumpster location. We could turn this into a head-in area over here.
Right, I think that's the fire apparatus space. I don't think you'll be able to block that.
Yeah, you don't want to block that.
It wouldn't, I don't think it would block it. It just might, well, yes, it could when they're picking it up. Yes.
We'll explore the options we have. We'll see if this works. If we think we need to go over in this area, we'll look at it and we'll look to plan for that 5 feet setback to the transformer if we need to put something in this area. And like I said, if we do lose this space, we have the option to pick that back up over in here and still maintain the electric charging for the attendant's car.
And Brandon, it should be 5 feet to the non-combustible wall to the Sally Port.
Okay.
So I know you mentioned that earlier.
We're about 3 and change right now, so that'll be something we'll take a look at as well.
Okay. So when, Brandon, would you want to talk to the engineer, the electrical company? Wait till after schematic, or should we set that up sooner rather than later?
I think if we want, we can reach out to the engineer and start talking about some of the stormwater challenges on the site and see if they're going to agree to our approach. Because I think if they're going to ask us to do as much as we can, and we do need to provide for some sort of, whether it be an infiltrating trench or an actual underground system, and they're okay with us using some of the right-of-way area, I'd like to make sure that we include some of that on our schematic plan. So if we have the committee's blessing, we can start reaching out to try and set up a time to talk with them in the next week or so.
Sure. Is that you, Joe? Or is it somebody else?
No, you could forward that to me, and I could put everybody in touch. Bill's office is right next to mine, so
Okay.
we could get together probably relatively short order and start working through that.
We'll collect our thoughts, put together a schematic stormwater summary for, appropriate for where we are at this point and some of the questions and approaches that we're considering, so that we can start reviewing that with him.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
So everyone, I will relinquish screen control, and obviously if anyone thinks of anything else, we're around and can listen in for anything else relevant to us.
So who's next, Janet?
That would be GGD. Who's going to run this one? Is it Chris or David or Ben?
No, Chris Garcia with Garcia Gillespie D'Souza. I will share my screen and
Chris, you should have it, yep.
all right, here we go. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
So we'll just have a PowerPoint that we can go over just to discuss what we saw in terms of our feasibility study. Again, my name is Chris Garcia, plumbing and fire protection engineer. Ben Miller is our HVAC engineer, and David Pereira is the electrical. In terms of the PowerPoint, Just a quick agenda. First, we'll talk about the HVAC systems. Ben will talk about those. Then we'll move into electrical, fire protection, and plumbing. And then if any questions come up during the presentation, please feel free to let us know. So Ben, I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks, Chris. So we're just going to go through our executive summary, like Chris said, just give you a brief overview of what we've observed throughout the building in regards to the systems that we've seen, how it's going to impact the new scope of work. You can go to the next slide if you want, Chris. All right.
Hey, Ben, could you speak up a little bit? I'm having a hard time hearing you. That's,
Sure.
I don't know if I'm the only one, but
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So heating, ventilation, and air conditioning equipment. The systems and the equipment are in poor condition, especially in a boiler plant. All equipment appears to be original from the 2002 and 2003 when the building was built. Primary heating is from the central boiler plant. Cooling is from the central chilled water plant. Ventilation and air conditioning, rooftop units and indoor air handling units have supplemental AC. The majority of the ductwork, piping, distribution can potentially be reused with modifications. The central boiler plant originally had 3 boilers. One of the boilers has been removed, so there's only 2. And I believe Janet had sent along comments that the building was operating off of 1 boiler. Boiler pumps are at the end of their anticipated serviceable life, so they would be considered to be replaced in the near future. Next. The central cooling plant. Cooling is provided for the rooftop units and air handlers through a roof-mounted air-cooled chiller. There's a pumps, expansion tanks, chilled water equipment systems. The central cooling plant is recommended to be replaced in the near future. Ventilation and air conditioning is provided throughout the buildings with 3 rooftop units, 2 indoor air handling units. The RTUs and air handling units are approaching the end of their serviceable life. Replacement would be recommended within the next 5 years. Most spaces have VAV terminal boxes. These include hot water reheats to raise the discharge temperature of the box when it's in cooling mode. As we understand, the system does not seem to meet all the occupants' space temperatures. One RTU is located over the telephone room 208 in the police station. This has hot water and chilled water mains that rise up to the rooftop unit over the server rack. Water leakage was noted as an issue and a serious concern in this space. We have some pictures there of some of the indoor air handling units and the rooftop units. With the bottom corner picture is some of the pipe penetrations going up to the rooftop unit, I believe.
So Ben, if I could just jump in, I think we carried replacing the rooftop units and the air handlers in our budget. The project is primarily a renovation in addition to the police side. When you say the VAV boxes and the terminal units, are you talking about both sides, the fire and the police, or was your survey specific just to areas where we're renovating and putting on additions?
So it was our understanding kind of throughout the building that the temperature that was throughout the building wasn't adequate, and it didn't seem to keep up with where the building occupants wanted it to. So It was more of a building overview. It wasn't just limited to the police station.
So some of these, recommendations would affect areas of the fire department, replacing terminal units and VAV boxes on that side also.
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next slide, please. Terminal heating and supplemental cooling. So here we have a picture of one of the ductless air conditioning systems. I believe this was in one of those IT rooms. There's also some of these located in the dispatch to help with supplemental cooling through that space. Supplemental heating is provided throughout the buildings and vestibules and lobbies. They appear to be functioning properly. The equipment is approaching the end of its serviceable life, and it would be considered to be replaced within the next 5 years. Supplemental cooling is provided in the IT rooms, and the equipment consists of indoor evaporators and outdoor air-cooled condensing units that are connected with refrigerant piping between the two. Building exhaust. There are approximately 13 exhaust fans serving the building, a combination of roof-mounted and inline. The units appeared to be operational at the time of site visits. Some of the concerns that were brought up was equipment maintenance room 263, inadequate exhaust system, fumes and odors circulate to other portions of the building. The equipment maintenance room, equipment maintenance room 263, return grill was connected to RTU2, and there was some direct exhaust issues in the fire alarm maintenance room, EMT room, and the equipment maintenance room. We also understand that there's an issue with the fire station cooking hood. While in use, the odors circulate throughout the following spaces, which are the police station, the corridors, stairways, and the elevator. Below is a picture of the source capture system for the fire station apparatus bay. The hoses are run connected to the trucks. System was manufactured by Plymouth Industries. And then in the parking garage, there is ducted exhaust systems controlled by CO, nitrogen dioxide sensors, activate when the fan levels rise. The HVAC equipment is connected to the building management system. The building management system is manufactured by Automated Logic, and it is remotely monitored from a different building in the town. I believe what we would be proposing to do would be to provide a computer to monitor the central station, so it could be monitored or adjusted on site, as long and including remote modifications and monitoring from the public safety building as well as it is now.
So will that require a new system then, or is that just access through web management site?
I think it's kind of addition of a laptop on site and web management. I don't think it's would be an overcomplicated thing to add.
So Chief Scory or Calabresi, who monitors that, or who's responsible for monitoring that, making changes? Is that the town engineer or facilities?
Managed by the building department. We have no control over that here.
So if something's up, you call them and they tell you they're going to fix it from offsite.
Correct.
Is it, can I ask, I remember this from the programming, planning stages early that, you know, there was that lack of control. Does the town have a central, is that the way the town always, Joe, maybe you know the answer to this, is that the way the town always manages buildings remotely?
So the automated logic platform, we actually have in town 4 different building management control systems. Automated logic is probably one of the better ones as far as being responsive to us. So our staff could manage that through tablet or laptop, or if we need them to get out here and do some service for us, you know, we have a contract with them to be able to do that. 90% of it, I would say that our staff can handle as far as making adjustments and doing different things like that. You know, with the other 10%, we might need one of the techs to come out and make a change for us, but it's knock on wood, so far with this company, we've had great luck with them. I don't know if that completely answers your question, but.
No, I just, you know, wondering, you know, if there's a purpose to not allowing the building to be monitored in place or adjusted in place, if that's a standard practice or whether that was just set up and it works for you. And
honestly, I think it was something that I certainly inherited. I couldn't tell you, I wasn't, you know, in any position of any knowledge at the time when, you know, these thoughts were made. So
okay.
Whether it's the right way or the wrong way, it's the way it is. But I don't think our group is opposed to really anything at this point.
Okay, thank you.
I think the benefit would, and you could still have all the capability or limitations that you wanted to on the system, and it can still be monitored remotely for, you know, usage and other things that they're doing now. The benefit of having just some kind of interface on site would be to more quickly diagnose the problem and be able to react to it, or you might be able to see things a little faster. So when something goes down, you'd have more information readily available. Recommendations. So the following are some recommendations based on our site visit and discussions with the building occupants. Problems: heating system is underperforming and not meeting desired space comfort levels. Our solutions would be recommend replacement of the majority of the HVAC system's associated components and controls. Central heating plant. Problem: the mechanical equipment faults cause downtime, which allows the building temperatures to drop below acceptable levels. Central cooling plant equipment. The problem is it's approaching the end of its anticipated serviceable life expectancy and should be replaced. We recommend the equipment replacement include rooftop units and air handling units, terminal boxes, split system ductless cooling unit systems. Further review suggests the water leakage entering the IT room and the kitchen exhaust hood discharge from the fire station that we talked about. And like we just talked about, we would recommend the building management system upgrade.
So what does that upgrade entail then? Is that new devices, new wiring, or just?
So what we would do is we would meet, or we would try to get in touch with Automated Logic and see, you know, if they, how current the system is, and if it needs any updates from whenever the last time it was updated. It's probably been, you know, some work has been done since 2002, 2003, but any major components or anything like that that needs to be upgraded like that. And then just the BMS system monitoring at the building. Again, I think seeing Automated Logic there, they probably have most of this stuff intact, but there would be some things that would have to be upgraded.
Well, we would have to make any work under this building project proprietary then to automatic logic. Right, we're
So-
not changing the system. It's a town-wide system.
Right, right. Depending on if what's there is open protocol, if other devices can tie into their system, that would be what would determine whether it would be proprietary or not.
But I think I hear Joe, it's probably desirable to stay with the same system, right? You don't want to start mixing and matching.
So, Shane, you're right. One of the things that would be nice is if we could, develop some mechanical continuity between the building management systems. I could tell you that for at least one of the elementary schools in town, if not potentially two, depending on what the price comes in, we've actually asked Automated Logic to propose to us what it would cost for them to take over the building, and we switch the building management system to them. We have one vendor out there that, there's a couple things that we can only access if they come out to the site, and it's been kind of a thorn in our side getting them to come out, because their client base, we're a small fish in a very big pond. I would say, Ben, if you need to talk to them, maybe if you could send either me your information or Shane your information, I could try to arrange a meeting, whether if we have to get out on site altogether, or whatever the case may be, to get you whatever information you need so you can make the most well-informed plan and decision that you have to.
Okay, no problem. I can send you that after the meeting. So as far as newest systems to choose from, we have the overhead variable air volume mixing. This is a replacement of what the existing system is to meet any renovations or modifications that are going to be provided. And then the other component would be a variable refrigerant flow type system, which is also similar to what you have with the ductless AC units that are just fed from an outdoor condensing unit. Next slide, please. Overhead variable air volume mixing boxes the pros would be reuse of existing ductwork and piping in place with minimal rerouting, chiller plant and distribution systems, or package direct expansion cooling, low maintenance, no condensate drains, fans, filters at the terminal units, reduced automatic temperature controls installed costs resulting from reduced control components, again because most of those are probably already in place. The cons would be noise level, reduced temperature controls, reduced indoor air quality, maintenance of equipment, energy consumption will be similar to the existing building, potentially less, providing systems will be operating properly. Air handling unit systems. This is just a slide from a recent install that we had done. Typically used in all HVAC systems, ventilation is provided from the air handling units, dedicated outdoor air systems, DOAS, or recirculation type units, custom air handling units. Utilize energy recovery for increased energy efficiency. Heating can be hot water, gas-fired heat pump, supplemental electrical backup. Your current rooftop units are all hot water heated and have chilled water coils. So likely we'd be tying back into those sources. Cooling can be chilled water, DX. I'm sorry, let's cover it up. Or water source heat pump system. Filtration can be MERV 8 pre-filters, MERV 13 final filters. Improvements will be MERV 14 or MERV 16 filters, HEPA filters for critical applications. Air disinfection options can be UVC, aka germicidal UV, bipolar ionization, or electrostatic filters. Boiler plant will be a high efficiency, 90% plus gas-fired condensing boilers, boiler temperature reset controls, variable speed pumps with VFDs. For the chiller plant, high efficiency water cooled chiller, air cooled chiller, water source chiller with cooling tower or dry cooler, water source heat pump, chiller heater, ground source heat pump, chiller heater, variable speed pumps with VFDs.
So Ben, are you looking for a decision on this? I mean, not today, but you're giving us options here.
Right, I I think the decision, the decision is yours, but I would think the decision would probably be to match the existing systems.
Replacing kind, yeah.
Right, to simplify things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the other option that we would propose for renovations that we use a lot is the variable refrigerant flow VRF systems, which are fossil fuel free. This extracts heat from air, compresses it, and pushes it through into air handling units. Pros for this system are more temp comfort when a unit is provided in each space, high efficiency in cooling mode, less complexity as it does not require source pumping, less ceiling cavity space due to refrigerant piping size. Some of the cons of this unit is equipment will contribute to noise, compressor replacement over a few years, consumes more electricity in heating mode under lower temperatures. Models share the same refrigerant circuit, requires an air handling unit or RTU to provide ventilation at each space.
Hey, Ben, can I ask a quick question here? Is there any reason to consider, and I just thought about this as Shane asked that question before, the plan is to reuse everything we can, keep the cost down. Is there any reason to mix systems anywhere, like where the additions are, be different from the rest of the building to leave more in place? Or is that an impossible question?
No, it's not impossible. And there could be some value to that, where you would have multiple systems that would serve it. You can, again, if you tied them into the building management system, you can make sure that there's no fighting of the two systems in place. Where you need supplemental cooling, like in the dispatch area, where you have, right now they have those ceiling mounted type units similar to the VRF, and they have a terminal box which is serving it, but it seems undersized for it, so they put in those cooling units. You could have mixtures throughout in certain spaces. It would make sense.
Okay, just a question.
Sure. Yep. Next slide, please. Thank you. I think that's
All right. How you doing?
So, yes, so just before we jump to electrical, so Ben, just we're coming to the end of schematic design. We're going to go into design development in the next 6 or 8 weeks. And we want to bring a commissioning agent on board. Is there anything in the existing building you would suggest we do with the commissioning agent ahead of completing your design, or should we pressure test the existing system, get a baseline?
Pre-construction balancing report would be a good thing to have. They could go throughout the building and see how closely the air balancing, for instance, is to what the design performance was. And that way, if there's any deficiencies in the ductwork, it should rear its head there. Exhaust systems could be verified that they're operating properly.
Right.
And any of this stuff that if it is working good and you could scale back, you know, say the exhaust fans or something like that, maybe those could be taken out and they wouldn't have to be, everything wouldn't have to be replaced at this time. Something like that could be looked at as case by case basis. That would be good verification.
Right. I mean, is that something, you know, you could include in your recommendations, either, you know, some sort of upfront work to be done by a commissioning agent, or we're going to be going construction manager in this project, so they could bring somebody in, you know, before we bid a mechanical contractor in a year's time. Because I don't think we want to go through the whole design phase, bring an HVAC contractor on and you know, they say, hey, the system was junk, or there's no baseline and never worked.
Yeah.
We've all been there before, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So maybe you can include some sort of pre-commissioning or upfront testing by somebody before we bid in your recommendations.
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
Janet, if I might,
Yes.
anything, Janet or Shane, anything that we've heard so far from the site person and from Ben? Is it anything there that surprised you and is outside of the scope of what we thought we've got, you know, looking at from a budgetary process?
Well, I think the budget included all of the police side and minimal work over on the fire side. So for now replacing, you know, VAVs and terminal units over there, that would be out of the original scope. And then we have to figure out how we would get to that stuff. We don't want to start ripping ceilings down and opening walls and doing that in the fire side where we weren't contemplating any work over there. So we'll have to check that out.
Yeah, I agree with that, Joe. I talked to Ben briefly about, you know, what was owned the last time. And so you guys commented that you looked at the whole building the last time. Do you remember if you had recommend replacement of terminal boxes on the fire department side or anything last time? Or was it really restricted just to the police department side, I guess is the question.
I'm sorry, what do you mean by last time?
Oh, during the study, Joe,
Way back.
you know, yes, study versus, you know, 5 years ago versus now. So
I
yeah.
don't remember. I don't. Remember.
Yeah, I you know, Ben, had you guys looked at that at all to see if that scope kind of matches, or do you sense that there's a change?
I don't recall off the top of my head if it included the fire station side as well as the police station side. But what I will say is, you know, with that pre-construction balancing report that we're talking about, you know, if spaces aren't changing and the system's operating properly, there's not, you know, a huge driving need to have to replace things just because, especially a terminal box, if it's operating properly. If
right.
that report was to uncover something, some kind of deficiency that needed corrected, and it would make sense why that's not working, or minimal work that could reuse the existing system, but, you know, maybe a damper closed or something like that, and that's why people aren't getting the temperatures that they're looking for in the spaces. That report should help us with that, and, you know, again, that could probably scale back the total amount of terminal boxes that needs to be replaced under the project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. I think because, you know, if it's not broke, don't fix it on this project. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's our budget, Joe. So, I mean, it may be worth considering, you know, if you're going to have to come in 3 years from the finish of construction and replace all that stuff, you know, that's a decision, you know, you might have to make, but hopefully the report will, you know, be on the positive side. So
No, it sounds like a good idea to do that report.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Shane, Janet, everybody, I'm going to have to sign off here shortly, but Shane, I just want to know quickly, everything go okay this morning on the tour?
It did, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no issues.
All right, no issues, no questions yet or anything yet?
No, nobody ran out of the building and said it's not for them, so.
Yeah, well, okay, well, we've already had one.
Clear
I'm
them
sorry,
away.
we could have a, you know, a sort of a trend. Okay.
Yeah.
Hope not. Thanks, Joe.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess Gigi, or Jay, can we go on to the, I think it was electrical next, David?
Yep. All right, Chris, you want to just go to the next slide? Next one. All right, so in summary, the electrical systems are actually in fair condition. We went through, looked at electric rooms, checked out the generator, wiring methods, things like that. Everything seems, code compliant, in fair condition. There's an 800 amp service, 480 volt. So what that means is none of the options or none of the additions, would require a service upgrade that I can see. 800 amps at 40 volts is, 12 to 13 watts a square foot. So that seems okay. And there's plenty of adequate capacity in those distribution panels. Generator's in good condition. However, there were certain items, and I don't know if it was problematic, and I'd like to hear from the owner, that didn't back up the elevator, the chiller, or anything on panel HP2. I don't know if that's been problematic or if when power is out, things seem to be okay. The CCTV system, I need a little more information on that to see if that could just be extended and cameras added to it. Seems like some upgrades have been made. So essentially extension of most systems is possible for this renovation project. Next slide. Next slide. All right, so here's some specifics on the distribution system. You can see the 800 amp board. There's the picture of that transformer, and you can see the close proximity there to the Sally port. So that is something that needs to be considered. Generally, National Grid and Eversource, I know this is a municipal light plant, but their requirements, I'm sure, are the same, and it's 5 feet from a non-combustible wall, so that needs to be considered. Like I said, you could see that, I took some pictures of the distribution boards. There seems to be, adequate space to add sub panels, branch circuits to serve these areas that are being renovated. Next slide. So the emergency power system is a 300 kVA natural gas fired Caterpillar generator. So one of the transfer switches you can see in the bottom right hand corner, that's looks like it's been recently upgraded. The other transfer switch is original Zenith. It seems like it's been really well maintained. I haven't heard of any issues with it, but I would like someone at the town or at the facility to let me know if the chiller, elevator, or whatever's on HP2 not being on the emergency generator has ever given anybody heartache in the building, or if it's been generally fine. That would be the only reason to do anything with this generator, because obviously it would require upgrade if you were to add those things to the generator. The issues with adding or upgrading this generator would be space constraints. You wouldn't really be able to get a bigger generator in the existing room. You'd have to go outside. And for this project, there is no spot to put one outside. So, this would be a big deal, to say the least, to try to upgrade this generator. So we'd recommend keeping it at all costs. So my only question was, the chiller, elevator, and that panel, if we could hear back. There's a central UPS in the head end room. The initial visit showed in 2016 it was at 26% capacity. Now it's at our last, the visit we did last week was at 45% capacity. So, there's been some equipment added to it, but generally seems fine. So that's the emergency power system. You go next slide.
So David, is the elevator required to be on emergency?
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's not. It's just a lot of times public safety buildings, the whole building's on emergency.
Right.
And there's reasons for not putting a chiller and elevator. Those are the biggest loads in the building.
Yeah.
So that's how that if you added that to the generator, it'd obviously increase the size.
Mhm.
But I just would like to hear if in the experience or throughout the years, someone just said, you know what, it's very difficult to operate this building without those two items, then we can have a discussion about it. But, that just so everyone's aware, upgrading this generator is not a small task. It's a substantial project.
Is there a list of what's on the generator?
The whole building,
So except those three items.
except for those 3 items, right?
So moving dispatch, that generator will have the capacity to
Yes.
put the new dispatch on. It's not going to be an issue.
Correct. There's no
anything like that.
issues. There's no issues with the addition or renovation to connect to this existing generator. I know some discussions have taken place about the generator increasing in size, and the only reason why it would increase is if you were to add the chiller or elevator. And then if you did do that, it would be a substantial project, because we'd probably have to put it on the roof. And that would involve structure. I mean, there's no place in the site really to put another generator, and you can't get a bigger one in that room.
Yep.
So just so everyone understands that. Next slide. So fire alarm system is an EST Edwards fire alarm system. I mean, it's nearing, I wouldn't say near, it's close to its end of life, but they can go for a while. It's addressable, it's code compliant. I would recommend reusing it if there's no major issues. It's been serviced. It's a reputable brand. It's expandable, so there's no issues there. It looks like a BDA system has been added to the building, so that that's a good thing. We saw that in the radio room. One of the things we noticed is the location of the fire alarm control panel needs to be reviewed, because it looks like it's right on a wall that is planned to be relocated. So Janet, we just have to look at that a little closely is all, but it's not a showstopper. It's just something that needs to be considered.
Can I ask a quick question on the fire alarm panels?
Sure.
It's expandable, so like you're taking into account all the new square footage and any devices. So that's what you mean by that, right? Like that it can accommodate.
Yeah.
The
So
plan that's in front of us.
yeah. So that panel would be able to handle, if we added a dozen, or, probably even more than that. It's addressable, so we could add on to those loops. We could add power supplies for the, for the notification appliances. So there shouldn't be any issue reusing it.
I don't anticipate there being an issue.
Yeah.
And the master box, is that in the front lobby?
Yes, that can be either. It may be able to remain there unless there's a requirement that it be in the new. Well, if that's being renovated, it'd have to be relocated, but that's not a big deal anyways.
Yeah. It's not a requirement that it be exactly where it is.
Yeah. So we can work with if we can keep it there. I'd have to see what that means, but I don't see that as an issue at all.
Okay.
All right, lighting, you go to the next slide. So the interior lighting is in generally good condition. A lot of the lamps have been upgraded to LED tubes, but there still remains a lot of fluorescent fixtures. But in the new spaces, renovated spaces, it'll be 100% LED, high efficient fixtures with local controls. And what we would plan on doing is local room controllers for occupancy, dimming, and that type of control, because the system that's there now, the touch plate lighting controls, is pretty antiquated. I know it still exists, but you may have a hard time. It's essentially a relay panel. And I just don't see the value in extending that. And there's no real issues with room controllers for the renovated areas. I don't think it'll hurt you in any way. But we can talk about that if someone has some opinion on the touch plate system. We noticed some LED fixtures have been upgraded, like the garage. I think those high bay fixtures look like they were upgraded. But for the most part, they're in fair condition. And generally it'd be all new lighting in the renovated areas. Communication system, you do have that server room has a couple of issues. One that Ben mentioned about potential water infiltration. There's no space to add any data wiring. I know in the renovation we'd be pulling out some data wiring, so it may open up some spaces, but I think we'll probably have to add either a third rack or a wall mounted rack to accommodate the wiring. And then you can see that there's no vertical wire management or horizontal. There's no real wire management on most of those racks. So the patching has become kind of, unorganized. So that's pretty difficult to deal with. So I think putting a new rack to serve the new data is the direction we'd go. The building has a Rollin telecenter paging system, which can be expanded, Cisco VoIP phones. So those will all just be data jacks. And it looks like the radio room has had significant upgrades since the 2016 visit, which is good. So that's pretty much it for communications. Next slide.
So who does that for the town? Is there a town IT director that takes care of all that?
Yes, we have a town IT director.
So is that something, David, we should try and get cleaned up before this project?
I mean, I think that I'd probably want to do another rack just to keep it clean instead of getting into that rack and moving stuff around. I mean, we can look at that. It's kind of a, it's real detailed stuff, but I definitely recommend a sit down with the IT department to go over our plan and get their input, because, and maybe they can go in there and clean up some of that cabling, and they can tell me, there's actually more room than you think. It's just a lot of patch cables all over the place. So a meeting with them would be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
The security system looks like the CCTV was different. It looks like there's been upgrades to the CCTV system. It was hard for me to determine based on just looking at it. I know that the access control system looked like it went from Hirsch Velocity to a Linnell system. If anyone can correct me on that, which a Linnell is up to date, that can be added to. And I believe if the upgrades I'm thinking happen to an IP system for the cameras is there, then that can be upgraded or expanded as well. We just have to buy storage, but I'd need someone who's got more knowledge on those systems to explain what has happened as from 2016 to now. It looks like there's some stuff that's changed there.
David, those are both the IT director. A few years ago, we switched to the Linnell system, and I don't believe the cameras are.
I lost that last.
The camera system, it's changed from what was originally here, but I don't believe they're IP cameras.
Okay, I know the cameras have changed, but I still saw some old, DVRs, so I couldn't really tell. So that's, the DVRs have a limited capacity then. So cameras would probably need to be upgraded. And then the Linnell is fine. Linnell for access control, we can expand that. That shouldn't be a problem. Next slide. So this slide just kind of, puts some of our recommendations down. I spoke to each one throughout the other slides. So, the distribution system, we're going to reuse in a renovation program. We'll study the utility bills to just confirm the demand versus the new load. I really don't think any service upgrade would be required with an 800 amp service for this size building at 480 volts. We plan on reusing the generator. All lighting would be new LED. The lighting control system we'd upgrade with up-to-date technology in the new spaces, and fire alarm expand, just expand the existing Edwards. And we talked about the data rack, so we could meet with the IT director. Next slide. Actually, that concludes electrical. If anybody's got any questions.
Okay, I will go over the fire protection and plumbing systems. Just as a quick summary, the building is protected with an automatic sprinkler system. I believe the system was installed as part of the 2003 renovations. Even though the system's close to 20 years old, it all looked like it was in working condition, good working condition. Existing conditions, there's a 6-inch fire service with backflow preventer and alarm valve that is located in the mechanical room on the mid-level. There's a 4-inch fire department connection on the outside of the building adjacent to the gas meter. It seemed to be accessible, looked wasn't damaged in any way. The building has multiple sprinkler zones. All of the zones are controlled by their own dedicated shutoff valve, and each zone has a flow switch, all monitored by the fire alarm system. And as I said, the sprinklers are provided throughout all the spaces within the building. In terms of the scope of work, I think the system is adequate. We would modify it and expand it to protect the new addition, the new vestibule, as well as the pop out on the sally port. I see no issue with the existing system being able to support those new spaces. And then in the renovated areas, just these colored sections of the plans, we would expect that we'd replace the existing sprinkler heads with new. Depending on what we do with the ceilings, we'll work that with Janet and her team. If ceiling heights change, then maybe some of the piping would need to be replaced. But if everything stays the same, there's no coordinations with issues with new ductwork or anything like that, we would expect the existing piping to remain, and we would just provide new sprinkler heads in new ceiling areas to deal with the architectural layouts. So in terms of fire protection, that would be the scope of work. For plumbing, again, it seemed like most of the plumbing systems were renovated as part of the 2003 construction. We have cold water, hot water, sanitary waste and vent systems, storm drainage, piping, and natural gas that supply the building. All those systems seem to have capacity to deal with the small renovations we're planning. The building's connected to municipal sewer and water services, as Brandon had gone over, I think, early on when we talked about the site utility systems. We don't see any issues with any of the utility systems supplying the building. Plumbing fixtures, the standard manually operated flush valves at the urinals and water closets. The lavatories had manual faucets. There's high-low water coolers and janitor sinks that are flow-mounted mop basins that have soap dispensers. I know there was a comment about having hot water at the urinal. I think that's just a function of there's a cross connection somewhere that we would probably need to investigate further as we got down into the design development and whatnot to deal with that. One of the typical issues we find is cross connections when it comes to these soap dispensers at the mop receptors, so we can look at that further. I didn't see any backflow preventers on those systems, so those can tend to sometimes allow hot water to migrate throughout the systems if you're still having those problems. The water system, there's domestic water service is located in that same mechanical room. The existing water heater is original to that 2003 renovation. The storage tanks had been replaced. It looked like they were replaced around 2017 or 18. I'm not positive on that date, but the storage tanks have definitely been replaced since our 2016 visit. All the distribution piping is copper. Part of that photo on the top left corner is the mixing valve had also been replaced as part of the hot water system, but The domestic water distribution system looked in good condition and can be reused during the renovation. One thing we did note, that water heater, its standard efficiency, it's close to getting 20 years old. It's near the end of its useful life. So one of the recommendations we had beyond the original scope of the renovation project was replacing that with a more high efficient water heater that could, probably would be direct vent, which we would have to work out on how we route that. Most likely it would be, vent would be routed through the sidewall as opposed to having to go up through the roof. Drainage systems, the system's cast iron in general for the sanitary and storm drainage. What cast iron we were able to look at appeared to be in good condition. There are flat roof areas that have roof drains. The roof drains appeared to be good to fair condition. Some of the areas of the roofs had some ponding on it, but it didn't seem like there was anything to be overly concerned about. As Brandon mentioned early on, the addition, especially in the front, is going to affect the sewer service for the building, which we'll have to deal with when we deal with the locker room renovation. And then also there's a storm drainage along with the downspouts that are on the front. There's a small bump out that has a flat roof that we'd have to deal with that storm drain as well, and rerouting it. So again, just the recommendations we talked about in the renovated areas, we'd provide new sanitary waste and vent for the renovated plumbing fixtures, connecting those into the existing building system. The domestic water system the existing system would get extended to connect to the new fixtures. New plumbing fixtures, in the public areas, we would still use manual flush valves unless you wanted to go with a sensor type flush valve. But typically in the lavatories, we have been using the battery censored faucets that have a regenerating battery that extends the life of that faucet. The natural gas service, that's adequate. We would extend that if we had to deal with any proposed HVAC modifications that might happen. So, all the plumbing systems seem in good condition. We could extend those and deal with the renovation areas. How was it? Oh.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, it was a pretty good summary of what we have. So I think John has probably talked to you guys that the schematic design, we're going to do that in early April. So hopefully we'll have your reports, your recommendations. We're going to, do an estimate at that point, and that's when we're going to kind of test and see if our budget is sufficient. So anything we need to look at, if you guys can make sure it's in your recommendations, that we include that at the schematic design, because this is probably the one and only chance we're going to get to take a look at the updated reports for the MEP systems.
Yeah, we talked to, I talked to Ben specifically about, because the HVAC is the biggest challenge. We talked about that a lot already. So to sort of try to capture the scope in the schematic design, so that we see what our budget is. So we've talked about that already, but I'm glad to say it again. So.
Okay.
All right.
Two things. Chief Sullivan had some comments in chat. Just want to make sure people saw those. And those faucets you showed, I believe we've had nothing but problems. I think we've spent quite a ton of money in the town replacing all the ones installed in the Galvin.
Okay.
And a lot of that had to do with the sensor needing light, and then the sensor lights weren't charging the faucets, and then battery issues. So we've spent like tens of thousands in faucets. So I have no idea if it's the same kind, but being on the capital planning committee as well, I know we talk a lot about faucets at the Galvin, and just be cautious about what's being put in, because those things were basically all replaced several years after they were put in. So
Okay, that's good input.
Yeah, I know, I got the chief's comment with the annunciator, so that makes sense. That's pretty a typical complaint with the trouble alarms and stuff in the dispatch. So we'll note that and include that in our drawings.
Okay.
Okay, I can stop sharing.
Okay. Anything else from anybody?
I think I'm all set. Thanks, everybody, for coming. So I'll write up some meeting minutes. I think we have a couple of action items. Janet, so we'll just coordinate some of those
Yep.
meetings or phone calls with the town departments and the town folks. Get some of those answered and keep moving.
Shane, do you have an idea how the report for the mechanical that we were talking about, the when that might get going? Just curious.
The which?
For the I'm losing, I got no words here.
Balancing report.
Balancing report. Yes, the balancing report for Ben. Do you know when that might get going? I'm just trying to balance the schematic design date, the CM getting on board, the narratives being done, and to try to make sure that I can
I don't. I think it's a good idea to do because we have a baseline going in, so I got to figure out whether we have a commissioning agent do that or we have the CM bring somebody in to do it. As a sort of already packaged, but.
Yeah, I know that on another project.
That I was just going to say, if it's not working, you're not going to say, "Hey, it never worked anyway."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I know that I'm working with GGD on something else, and we were talking about getting somebody in. And I don't know, you guys have someone in case Shane has any problems that you might be able to get in to do something like that.
We could recommend some companies that we
Yeah,
that we work with.
I know that we're doing something else that you guys are going to offer a recommendation just in case, Shane. So that might be able to get in to do that balancing report. Okay.
Right, and again, I think certainly for Ben, that's why it's important to really tie down the scope between the police and the fire side and how much we're doing on the fire side, because I don't want when we come to balance the project at the end, the excuse to be, well, you didn't do anything on the fire side, so it was never going to be balanced the way you wanted anyway. So that's why we need the baseline.
Yeah, I don't want to wait for the CM, I guess. That's going to be at the end of March or at the beginning of April, and then they'd have to schedule it. It might be beneficial, and that's something we can talk about to get that done sooner than later by someone independent, not really tied to the CM at this point, because, they're going to be on board, the 26th of March. So, it might be a good idea to know that scope now, if we can, or get at least going.
Right.
So.
Yeah, if Ben, if you can put together a recommendation, and we can either, we'll figure out getting somebody out there to do it. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Ben. I appreciate it.
It would take a month to get a commissioning agent on as well. So
yeah, exactly.
Somebody direct.
Okay.
We can do that.
All right.
And then David, is there any recommendations you do for kind of circuit testing and circuit tracing? Or are we, again, just in these renovated buildings, it's always spaghetti and water in there.
This one is pretty straightforward. I don't think that's necessary.
Okay. All right.
The other thing that was come up from Brandon Barry from PAR, who brought up the notion of the cameras through the downspouts and all that. I don't know how that gets done or who would do that as well. Anybody have a thought on that one?
Yeah, I'm not sure if Joe is still on, but maybe we can just, do that through the DPW. Sure,
Okay.
they have somebody who does that.
Yeah. Whoa. Okay. Okay, all right. So I'll talk to Shane about that because I'd like to get that going as well, just to see, I mean, the downspouts that are coming down the front of the building, if everybody remembers, there's not going to be a pitch roof on the addition. It's going to be a flat roof building. I don't know how to, we're going to have to deal with all the rain coming off that front part of the roof. As you recall, we couldn't put a pitch roof on because the existing pitch roof on the police department was not original to the building, and so it can't take any loads. So we're gonna have to figure that one out. So I'll work with, we'll be thinking about that one immediately, just to figure out how to deal with that, whether we try to collect all the rain off that top roof onto our new roof, and then come down one spot. I don't know. We're gonna have to think that one through a little bit. It's not a very big footprint, but it does have the additional water coming off the existing. So we'll work on that one as well. Okay. All right. That's all we have, Shane.
Okay. All right, so I think we'll meet again in 2 weeks, whatever that is, the 16th or 17th. But I'll send an agenda to the committee before then.
Okay.
Yeah. Do we have to wear green and drink green beer during that meeting? Or-
I certainly hope
St.
so.
Patrick's Day, yeah.
I'll have a Guinness in my hand.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.